Hey, you guys, this is Josh
And Carolyn.
with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 steps to get you to a well supplied pantry.
Yeah, that's a good topic for right now. A lot of people are realizing that maybe their pantry wasn't as well supplied as they wish it
And did
was.
you know that Homeland Security actually recommends that you have 6 months of food stored up in advance, even that's not right now in the
Right.
coronavirus world.
Right.
That is in an everyday world. So we're going to give you some real good steps to work towards that.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into main topic, how's it going? What's going on?
Well, I think for everybody this has been kind of a challenging time, but we have some
Just a
really
little.
a little hard, right? Things are mixed up. And I think probably honestly you and I have a lot less effects of that in our lives than a lot of people do. One, we already work from home. We already homeschool, so we're used to being home all day, all together. Our life already works that way.
Pantry is well
Our
stocked.
pantry is well stocked, so we actually, we had lots of toilet paper on hand, still do, because we always just kind of live that way.
And we've obviously got a lot of space on the farm to
Right.
move around, so we're very blessed in that.
We've got a lot of
But-
room to get outside, let the kids go outside and play.
But we're feeling it.
Oh yeah, I think everybody's got to be feeling it. Even if you're like us and like the practical side of life isn't affected very much, it affects a lot of things. You know what I really miss? There's two things that are high up on my list of what's really missing for me right now. One is getting to fellowship with other families. We usually have people in our home often,
Yeah,
weekly
quite
at
regularly.
least, and I'm really missing that side.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing, and maybe this is a little shallow to say in this, is I'm really missing date night for you and I.
No kidding.
Usually you and I get out once a week to go out to a nice meal or, just get out and get away
Yeah.
and get to visit. And I think maybe we're going to come up with some creative ways to do that. Maybe go get some takeout or take a picnic
Well,
out and go kayaking or something.
I was going to say, the weather's breaking. The weather's
Yeah.
getting a little bit nicer. So, yeah, we can pick up the tailgate party.
Yeah.
So at least you and I can.
Yep.
And, kayaking's a good idea. So now that we can get out a little bit, we
Yeah.
can definitely do a little takeout.
It's been hard with the
And,
weather being
Yeah,
so bad.
it
on
really
top of
is.
it.
The social element all the way around,
Right.
whether it's our own activities that we do for refreshment, the kids, engaging with other people in fellowship. And I know everybody's really feeling
Everybody's
that. We're
feeling it,
all
yeah.
a little sick of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've got to be doing what's best to
Mm-hmm.
try to keep this thing moderated. And
But I think, let's see, other things though, life goes on,
oh yeah,
right?
there's lots of-
everybody's
yep,
still got to
lots
make
of-
life
lots
work.
of good stuff happening
So
here.
we've got spring just really starting to roll around here. It doesn't feel like it today. Today again, it's cool and cloudy
we're,
and a
we're
little
getting
rainy.
that back and forth, a little snow, a little rain, a little sunshine.
Little sunshine, but
Yep.
it is the ground, the plants, the animals are all saying, like it or not, whatever the
Spring's
weather's
coming.
saying, it is spring.
Yeah.
And so we've got a lot of things going on in the homestead that are spring type things. One for us, we just did a lot of spring cleaning, especially in the food storage areas.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we really prioritize that spring cleaning, make sure things are cleaned up. Things are, the inventory of food that's left is really gone through, making sure it's good, getting moved to the front, get this used up right away. And areas are very clean and ready to bring in more food this year because I'm seeing things like the rhubarb plants coming up.
Oh yeah.
And
Strawberries are starting to brighten up.
Strawberries are doing
Hey,
things.
a lot of your cottage garden, and this is the benefit of perennials, you guys. Perennials are an important part of your homestead garden food production
Right.
system because those are perennials that we're mentioning. You've got several perennials in the cottage garden that are coming up.
We do. I have a lot of the medicinal herbs coming up, some of the flowers coming up, and some of my perennial greens
I was going to
coming
say,
up.
yeah, you've got sorrel out there, French sorrel, which is a great
Yeah, a very good
eating green.
early
Yep.
spring one. The lovage is coming up. The good King Henry is coming up. That's kind of like a perennial spinach. The Caucasian mountain spinach is coming up. That's another kind of perennial spinach, kind of. It's more of a vine.
It's not really a spinach, but
consume it like
it's
a
vine.
spinach.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's all coming up right now. We can't even get seeds of our earliest spring things in the ground quite. We just had a hard freeze the other night, and yet
15 degrees. Yeah.
yeah,
Nothing's
so we don't
ready to
even
go
have
outside yet.
peas in the garden
You're
in the ground yet.
You're blessed if
Yeah.
you got stuff in the ground out there. We got to wait a little bit.
But we have all these things coming up, and there won't be too many weeks before we can actually start eating off of these perennials.
Yep.
And it's, we've got at least 6 weeks till we're eating off of any seed-started things in the garden here. So that's really exciting. And then we have lambs up in the barn.
We've got new lambs.
Oh, I love new lambs. They're so cute.
Aren't they?
Yeah, they're really cute.
It's really exciting.
So.
Now, you've got a lot more eggs coming in the house right now. The egg production has exploded.
Yes, we have between like 40, 45 eggs a day coming into the house. So we are preserving eggs. We can't eat that many, and that's the point. The point is to have more eggs this time of year than we can consume so that we can preserve them, because, you get back to winter and all of a sudden those chickens aren't laying the same. Especially up here, we have long hours of dark. So even if we add artificial lights, we still have a major decrease in egg production. So we need to make sure we have enough right now this time of year where the eggs are just coming in like crazy to put up for the winter, so we have eggs then too. So we are right now getting eggs into the freezer. We're getting all set up to start water glassing the eggs, putting them in the lime solution.
You probably know this if you followed us for a while, but do you know that you can preserve eggs raw for 8 months or longer?
Yeah, and they're still edible in like scrambled eggs.
Yep. We'll link to that below, that video.
Yeah.
Along with an egg preservation guide. And I was just reading an article on this. We've been doing this for a long time, but a lot of people are buying up eggs right now, not just to consume them, but to preserve them.
Yeah.
I just wanted to...
We're looking at some egg shortages right now in the United States. And so people are kind of going, wow, let's grab as many as we can and get them into storage. And so this is a great time to own chickens. I got to say, egg-laying chickens. Yep. So we're just busy with all those early spring things. And what are you up to?
Mostly finishing up Mom and Dad's.
Yes.
We're on the final stretch, and you've been hearing me talk about that for a while, but they're here. They're waiting.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple weeks left.
They're trying not to wait too impatiently.
They're doing great, but it's exciting. It's almost done.
Right.
So really, a lot of my extra time's going into there, and so I'm not actually getting some of the other things done I'd usually be doing right now on the farm. A little behind on seed starting and the greenhouse, but that's coming up. Just got some seed started, got our peppers in, tomatoes, some cabbages, started indoors, and just released a video on starting seeds indoors. There's some great tips in there. If you've never done this before, or you need some tips, some good ones in there, we've got a great way that works very well for us. Getting ready to get the greenhouse going. I'm glad I didn't because of that hard freeze we just had, but it's time to get our leafy greens going.
Yes.
In there.
In the greenhouse.
Yep. Getting ready for pigs.
Mm-hmm.
We've got pigs coming in. And we don't have a permanent place for them yet, so we're going to do a little pig rotation and have them help us turn up our compost and finish our compost during the summer.
That's good. Put them to work, huh?
Absolutely.
Help them enjoy their pigness.
Yeah. And just getting ready for the season to kick off here, get Mom and Dad moved in, and get going in the garden.
Now, last fall, you took extra time getting the garden all prepped. So it was very easy to go this spring. Now, I know right now with all the things that you have going on, you're having a hard time getting to the homestead projects because of all these other things going on. You are going, I am so thankful that I did that last spring.
Absolutely.
Or last fall.
The permanent raised rows were amended. They were composted. They were mulched. Mm-hmm. All I have to do is pull the mulch aside in the areas that we need to direct sow and that can't have too thick a mulch.
Yeah.
Or plant our starts right through the mulch.
Right there.
And so I am really, really thankful that all that work got done in the fall and for these permanent beds that don't need to be tilled up right now, besides that it's better for the soil.
Right.
So that's a major load off.
It really is, and this is
back.
just such an important lesson, and it's so hard for all of us. None of us can do it perfectly, but the more you can do it, the better. When you can be ahead, it means that you are so much more ready. You have a lot more margin for these times where life just doesn't go as planned.
Which we're all realizing right now this can happen. It's a reality to humanity. We get very comfortable and think we've got everything in control and laid out. And this is a real lesson right now that life can change very quickly. And so the more advanced thinking we're doing, the more planning ahead we're doing, the more being prepared we are, the easier it is to roll with the unexpected things in life.
Well, and I know you talk to the kids about this all the time with their chores. You know, don't put off a job that can be done right now, because when you start putting things off, they build up, and then all it takes is one event, and all of a sudden you're just in a bad place.
Yeah, you know what? Something always happens when you let the water troughs get low.
Right.
Or whatever it is. That's one that I experienced with the kids, you know. But it's the worst thing always happens when you're at your worst. And so, we want to try to stay ahead. That's just very helpful.
It's always a
Take some organization and planning. But that really, guys, to this lifestyle, to the homesteading lifestyle, that's a big key to success. Yes, you need your skills and you need a piece of property or whatever. But if you're not planning and organizing, it's much, much harder.
Because I guarantee you start taking children and dogs and farm animals, you're going to have some mess and some disaster. Sorry, something just fell. Sooner or later.
There's always going to be a wreck.
Putting that combination together, you're always going to have some sort of unexpected event. So.
Absolutely. Well, we better move along here.
Move on to the question of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so from Alana Bunch.
I think we're going to do this one.
I am sorry. Yep. Okay, we picked another one, so forgive me. Claudia H. on Farm Animals on the Homestead asks, I want to know more about your sheep. What breed? Why do you keep them? Milk, meat, fiber, or all of the above?
Yeah, so if you didn't see the video we released last weekend now, 2 weekends ago, the barn one, Barn Animals. That's a really fun video. I had a lot of fun doing that video because it was a good excuse just to go sit out in the barn and watch the barn animals.
Hang out with the critters.
It was. So if you're feeling stressed at all or whatever, just need some quiet animal time, this is a great video just to put up.
Or if you wish you had a barn to go into and sit with the animals, that's pretty much what this is. Really simple, but we're in the barn all the time, and we all found ourselves sitting there.
We all just sat there on the screen and just watching. The kids came, and we're all in and out of the barn, and so it wasn't a new sight, but it's just such a relaxing thing. So I think it's fun.
So anyways, on to the sheep.
She was referring to that video, and in that video we showed our sheep and the new baby lambs in there. So she's asking what variety of sheep we have. We have 2 different varieties there, even though we have only 2 adult sheep right now. We have an Icelandic ram. We really like him. He's a nice guy. He's a little wily. Nice guy, maybe like nice as a ram. He's not a teddy bear.
He's not too aggressive, but no, he's not a teddy bear.
He's not a teddy bear.
Yeah, he's going to keep his distance.
But then we also have a Gotland ewe. She's actually now a 2nd generation, so she's a Gotland Icelandic cross.
Right.
But those Gotland, the wool is great for next to skin. It's kind of like that merino. It's a very, very soft. It's not itchy, so it's a great wool to work with for knitting. Whereas that Icelandic is a much rougher, tougher wool. It's got hair and wool. It's kind of a specific, that breed. And so it's really, really durable, but it's also pretty itchy. So it's great for things like carpets and rugs and things that just really need to wear, but they're not great necessarily for next to skin.
So currently that's really all based around wool with a secondary as meat. We have the Icelandic because they're good keepers. We're breeding those in because they're very, very good keepers. They're on the small side for meat production. The ones that we've had access to, I don't know if there are larger ones. And the wool's a little bit coarse. The Gotland makes great wool and is a little larger, and they do great meat. So no milk production in these for us.
We have done milk sheep.
We have done that. Yeah, that's just not something we chose to carry on with it. We loved the sheep milk. Was very good.
It was very tasty.
Just the setup wasn't worth it for us. And in the future, we'll probably add in a ram eventually that is a little more meat-based to try to balance the qualities of the Gotland wool with something a little bit larger for the return on feed for meat production.
Yes.
So
Now, I've got to say that the Icelandics have been incredibly good at just being a hardy breed that takes care of themselves.
And
They are really low maintenance as far as, any health problems or anything like that.
We've had none. And so have the Gotlands,
Gotlands
as well.
have also, yes.
Gotlands are hard to find
Yes.
in the United States. And ours are like 95% Gotland. We bought them from a breeder who was breeding up to pure Gotlands.
Right.
But they've been great as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the next question that's going to come is, do I actually use the wool? I don't know how to spin yet. I do have a spinning wheel, but I don't know how to spin yet. I call that my grandma project. When I'm a grandma and not a mom, then I'm going to learn how to spin. I just don't have the time right now. But I do enjoy knitting a lot and crocheting. And so I actually send the wool down to a local mill, a wool mill, have it spun for me. I've also gotten to work with a local hand spinner who's done some of it on shares. And so then I do get to knit with it, and I've really enjoyed getting to do that.
Yeah, several of us have got great warm beanies. If you see those beanies on our heads, Carolyn made those. And keep us warm in the wintertime when we're out and about.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, we've got to get on to the main topic, you guys. And a lot of you right now are thinking about filling up that pantry and getting a well-stocked pantry.
Right.
And, there's good reason that Homeland Security, and I don't know if any of the other agencies, but that even the government tells us, it's a good idea to have 6 months worth of food. Our systems are pretty fragile. The grocery store systems are fragile. They can be interrupted easily. And different events like we're experiencing right now, besides isolated weather events that some of you experience in different places. And a well-supplied pantry is something that not a lot of people have, but that is not that hard to build up. Take some steps and some skills.
Right.
And you don't have to be raising all your own animals and growing all your own food to create a well-supplied pantry. So we've got some steps here.
Right. And I think it's really important to note that you kind of touched on it real lightly, but a supplied pantry is just a good life policy not because we're all in the middle of a coronavirus,
right?
But because you may experience a job loss at some point that you weren't expecting, and you need to be able to get by for longer with less cash outlay bringing in your food. It may be an ice storm and the electricity goes out and you can't go get food from the grocery store. Or, there's so many different things that happen. Maybe you have a family crisis that's just requiring your time in a way that you're like, I just don't have time to get to the grocery store. So it's a really, really good policy in life just to have this backup. Just like it's a good policy to have a savings account, it's a good policy to have a food savings account in your pantry and in your house.
And just before we dive into these 10 steps real quick, let's clarify that when we're talking about the pantry, certainly there's an area in the house that we call the pantry that's mostly dry goods. But really, we're talking about all areas of food storage, whether that be your dry goods in your pantry, bulk storage, root crops, meat, dehydrated. We're not going to go into all of that, but you want a well-rounded supply, not just a barrel of beans that'll get you through 6 months.
Although that can be a decent place to start.
Yeah, so absolutely.
We're gonna walk you through, if you're brand new to this, the steps that you would take if you're just used to grocery shopping maybe every week, maybe every 2 weeks, and that's the way you're filling up, your refrigerator and your food supply is on that step-by-step basis. We're going to walk you through the steps that you're going to take to go from that to a very resilient food supply with some backup storage. So I think the first step and the first thing we really have to talk about, we say this about most things on the homestead, right? Don't try to do it all at once. You will have a disaster on your hands and it will be a mess. It won't be successful and you're going to waste a lot of food. You're going to waste a lot of money doing it that way. And you're going to be super frustrated. Don't try to just go, okay, I need to go get 6 months of food storage. You don't want to do it that way.
Well, and especially if you're getting started with gardening or animals.
Right.
I had a question the other day that somebody said they're trying to stock up their pantry and how much food should I grow?
Right.
And my first response is, look, on the first year, you're not going to just grow all the food you need, can it, and get it in the pantry. That's too much to tackle at one time, and you're actually going to end up wasting resources. If you want to do that, go buy the barrel of beans. And not that that's not a bad idea.
Right.
There are things you can do in short term to back up, but you want to work in steps when it comes to building this well-rounded, long-term pantry.
So I really think the first step that you want to, and I'm going to mention the goals and then we're going to kind of go into them, start with the thought that you're going to get 2 weeks of backup on hand. And then you move up to a month's worth of backup. And then maybe you start buying things in a different way, bulk. We'll go through these steps and you aim for that 6 months eventually.
So if you're saying 2 weeks, instead of buying your groceries when you go to the store for a week, you're saying buy 2 weeks worth of groceries.
Yeah, and I'm going to step you through the steps to get to that, because that for a lot of people who don't eat that way regularly, don't shop that way, that can be a challenge all on its own. But break this down. If right now you have very little food storage, start thinking that your first goal is to get to the 2-week mark. Don't think I need to get to the 6-month mark. That's the several goals out mark, okay?
Right.
So we just want to do it step by step. Yep. So the first thing I think that everybody should do is to work on the emergency backup food. This is that food that's going to sit in your pantry. You're going to eat off of it here and there, but it's not the food that on a good day you're going to plan on eating all the time. This is like beans and rice. This is really cheap, really simple to stock up on, and you can kind of always feel like maybe that's not what I want to eat 3 meals a day for 2 weeks straight. But while I'm getting the rest of my supplies ready, I know I have something that we can survive off of. The foods for that are beans and rice, again, are amazing. They're just good for that because they just store and they're a complete protein. They're just a good meal. And you can add to that a couple jars of salsa. That gets even better.
How about some bought-in canned goods to start to build on that? Large cans of, say, diced tomatoes or something, different things to start to balance out the diet.
Right. Absolutely. And things like peanut butter, nut butter, canned meats, things like that are all a really, really great place to start. And again, this is just like that really kind of emergency. This is your fallback plan if you haven't taken the next steps to get to like 2 months or 2 weeks of varied meals that you have. So just go get a big bag of beans and rice, big bag of each, and get it into some container in your house. And at least you've got, that's like your insurance policy. At least you have something,
so
right?
We're kind of articulating 2 steps here together, I think, if I'm hearing you right. One is some of those bulk buys, those good things that are inexpensive bulk that are getting you ahead of the game. The other is kind of even your regular groceries extending out from week buying to 2 week buying.
Well, that comes up soon. That comes up next.
Okay.
So first we want just the insurance policy of something that you can eat for a couple of weeks if you have to. And that's where that beans and rice
and then keep
really
adding to that.
And then we're going to take another step. So that's that just baseline. Next, I really believe that everybody needs to have about 2 days worth of meals on the shelf that you don't even have to heat. Okay? This is because sometimes life disasters take that twist of the electricity's out, we're in an ice storm, everything's going crazy. I just need to open a can and eat something and survive now.
Making life really, really easy.
Really, really easy. And hopefully you don't have to eat that kind of meal 2 days straight, but at least you have it on hand for the moments that happen where you just need something. This is things like crackers and peanut butter. That canned meat just comes in handy. You have, you can eat a can of cold beans from the store, even if you don't like it.
Canned corn is great.
Canned corn, just something like that so that you have a couple of protein bars, something like that. You don't need a whole month's supply of these things, just enough that you can eat for a couple days in this like time emergency where things you don't have the time to focus on getting food prep done or working.
Good.
Okay, so that's step 2. Right? Step 2 and 3 there is to get that food
That was step
ready.
3.
Okay.
Yep.
So now you need to start thinking about getting your 2 weeks of food on the shelf. This is your 2 weeks of food that you can eat regularly. Now this is a step because when you take this step and you go to 2 weeks of food, this isn't going to be like, I just went to the grocery store and now I have 2 weeks of food in my shelves. This is going to be that now I always have 2 weeks of food on my shelf. Even when I get to what I think of as, I'm out of food, I need to go shopping, there's still 2 weeks of food on the shelf. This is like your bank account. Some people like to zero their bank account when they have $500 in it, right? They always have that backup there that gives them some elasticity.
Right.
Right?
And you're ideally growing that.
And you're growing that. So right now, you're going to start zeroing out your food supply when you get to 2 weeks of food. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that well?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so what you're going to start to do is when you go to the grocery store and you buy a meal that can be a pantry type meal. Let's say you go and you go buy spaghetti, box spaghetti, because you eat that regularly.
Okay.
Instead of buying enough for 1 week, you buy enough for 2 weeks, or you buy enough for a month. You just start multiplying out what you're buying of things that can sit on the shelf.
Now, can I interject something in here, because this ties into budgeting, and,
Yes.
and it's been a while since we had to work through this, but in the beginning we had to work with our budget and change over
Right.
from a weekly budget, and we had to plan to be able to do that. And that's why it's one of the reasons it's important to do it in these steps, these
Right.
weekly steps, because it's very hard to go from buying weekly to buying monthly,
Right.
or to adding a lot on. And so there's another side of that, building that skill, is budgeting and stretching yourself a little
Yes.
bit. And as you start to do that, that gets easier and easier, and you can take larger chunks to it and add more. But you have
Right.
to have that, understand that that does affect people's budget.
It does.
And it did with us.
It did
that
with
was
us.
a growth process.
And a really good way to do that is to say, okay, this week I'm going to think of 2 meals that we eat regularly that can be made from primarily pantry foods. Spaghetti's one. You've got a sauce. You've got the noodles that you get from the store. If you're grocery shopping and that's the way you're eating, then that's one way to do that. We do like rice and beans, so I think of that a lot. But a pollo bowl with rice and beans and canned chicken and some salsa, that's another great meal that you can have right out of the pantry.
Right.
And so you want to start thinking about a few meals, and in the first week, just stock up on 1 or 2 meals worth. So you don't need to do this all at the same time, but just get ahead a month's worth of 1 or 2 meals. And then next week or next month, start getting ahead more. And then you always stay ahead, so you can spread out the financial impact of having to buy a month's worth of food all at once.
Right, in the beginning, but
In
you're
the
building,
beginning.
by doing that, you're building
Yes.
schools, you're building your pantry slowly.
Right.
You're also changing the way your budget works as you get used to that, so that eventually you can buy once a month.
Right.
Instead of shopping every week. You know,
Yes.
I mean, it depends on what you're eating. There's fresh things that you got to go more often, but that helps you rearrange your budget to be able to do that and start to make those bulk buys where you're buying in bulk and you're also getting a better price.
Absolutely.
And this whole momentum that gets going.
Right. And so you want to start in this step, you really want to focus on 2 weeks to a month's worth of food. And you want to focus on changing your buying and eating habits so that you always have at least 2 weeks of food on the pantry shelf.
Yep.
Okay?
That's a start. Yep.
As a start. That's a great place to start. Okay, so next step, and this gets really important because we're going to start talking about true bulk buying and not just buying multiple of a thing, but actually getting big packages of things. And this is where that money savings really comes in.
Well,
right?
and the skill, yes,
And the skill comes in.
of buying, in larger quantities less often.
Before you buy anything in a larger quantity, the first step you have to take is to think through your storage of that item
Where are you
and the
gonna put
place
it?
that you're going to store it in your house. Don't ever bring home half of a cow from the butcher without the freezer space to put it in. And, you and I have been guilty of not half a cow, but different things like that in the past. And getting maybe ahead of ourselves, seeing the good opportunity and maybe not having all the practical steps worked out.
Right.
It just causes a lot of scramble and it causes a lot of wasted money. Because then you're like, I just bought a 50-pound bag of rice. How am I going to store this thing? I need to run out and go buy a food grade bucket. Maybe you don't have the time to look for a great deal on that. You just have to grab the first thing that comes to hand. So think about your food storage before you take the next step.
Right. Don't get
Okay.
the cart before
Don't
the
get the
horse.
cart before the horse. So the next step, though, is to start buying as much as you can bulk. So when you're buying bulk, you're buying a large bag of something, a large serving of something, and you are responsible for breaking it up into smaller serving size amounts. So the perfect example of that is the 25, 50-pound bag of rice, 50 pounds of beans, maybe the half cow from an actual rancher or a whole pork pig. Buying bulk can also be buying a whole case of tomatoes from the farmer that then you'll have to preserve or do something with. But you want to start making as many purchases as you can in a bulk amount and storing that Okay, so in step number 7 is to start stretching out your food storage. Now you're starting to get these bulk foods in there. You got a couple weeks worth of, varied meals, different things going on. You really want to start stretching those out by adding your fresh seasonal stuff. You may already still be eating those fresh seasonal stuff. Hopefully you are.
So
as
you're
going
talking
through this
into
process.
the diet or into storage?
Into the diet. So you want to start putting in as many of those fresh seasonal things when you can, and they are fresh, they are seasonal, they are available, and that's going to help just extend that storage item. So you're not always pulling off your pantry because you're eating so many fresh things, right?
Right, yeah, eating, is all just good health, eating seasonally
Right,
and eating fresh in season.
In season,
Yes.
when you can. The next step in this, and this is going to seem a little maybe out of context, but the next step in building up your pantry and your food supply is to make relationships with your local growers.
Okay, so now you're starting to talk about transitioning from store-bought, pre-canned, pre-prepared foods towards...
We're going to start moving away from going to the grocery store and buying everything from the grocery store, moving away from that and getting into a more localized system. This is a really important step of a well-rounded and resilient pantry because, when the coronavirus hits, your local farmer still needs to sell what he's just produced, even if your grocery store doesn't have something in there.
So what's a good marker for people to say, so you're doing the grocery store approach, you're building skills, you're stocking up a pantry, you're getting bulk by going... I think most people would want a goal. I don't know that we quite did it that way, but what's a good goal to say, hey, before I start going to the farmer's market and really diving into preserving my own food and those kind of buys, I want to get, 2 months, 6 months?
I would say a little more of an it depends answer when you feel like you're comfortable with the system and you can take on a new skill. Because, really you need to be at a place of bulk buying where you're like, it's not a big deal to buy a new item. It's not a big deal to decide I'm going to start buying 25 pounds of oats at a time instead of little packages of oats because I know exactly the steps to take. It doesn't really shake my mind very much. This is a thing that's just true of learning any new skill. The mental space and energy that the new skill requires is much, much bigger than continuing a skill that you already know.
Right.
Right? So once you get comfortable with the way bulk buying and bulk storage works, then is the time to move on to the next step.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so you need to pick a marker was my point on a goal and say, I'm gonna build up this pantry and build these habits of bulk buying and changing the way my budget works so that I can buy in bulk and get the pantry stocked up and set a goal for yourself, whether it's a month or 6 months of feeling real comfortable there so that then you start transitioning to this preserving. You don't want to go out and say, I'm going to do 6 months of food, therefore I'm going to buy several $100 worth of tomatoes and learn to can them all in one shot.
No.
That's not a recipe for success. You want to have that pantry full and then do what you're talking about here is starting to go to the local growers and starting to buy in, and I think you're going to move towards preserving them yourself.
Right. So having a relationship though with your local farmers or your local fruit and vegetable sellers. Sometimes you have people who go to the farmers and they're kind of a middleman, and then maybe they've got a fruit stand on the side of the road. They're bringing things in from other people. Yep. Making a relationship with that person is just so incredibly valuable. And we've seen that over and over again. As I've been able to make relationships with different people like that before we were able to grow so much of our own food. And say, hey, if you ever have a whole, a bunch of extra something at the end of the day that you just need to get rid of, here's my phone number. Please call me. I will show up and grab it and get it. And we have gotten cases of wonderful free produce, very inexpensive produce, something that maybe was not going to last for the next weekend's market, but, still in good enough condition for us to eat fresh or preserve or just stick in the fridge and just kind of work through it.
And I think what's in between the lines there is while you're building that relationship, maybe buying some amount of fresh from them, starting to learn to preserve while you're also learning to hopefully eat more fresh if you're not, but you're preserving in smaller batches. That way, as you develop that relationship, what started happening for you, and this was when you were canning and doing smaller batches, eventually the guy calls you and says, hey, I've got 3 cases of beans that gotta go, but you're gonna need to do something with them quick. Or peaches was
Right.
one I remember one time was peaches from a farmer's market. And
Yeah.
then you've been practicing small scale and you can go, you know what? Yeah, I'm comfortable. I've got my jars, I've got space, I've been learning canning. Now I'm comfortable tackling a project like
Absolutely.
that. And that works very well.
Because the next step is to start replacing the things that you are buying from the grocery store, hopefully in bulk or from some bulk buy, with things that you are buying from your local farmer and
Right.
preserving it. So instead of grabbing a case of sweet corn in cans at the grocery store or frozen sweet corn, you're starting to replace that with your home canned or your home frozen sweet corn instead.
Right.
And
Yep.
that's just so important because now you're relocalizing your food supply. That makes it much more resilient to any sort of food delivery disruption.
Right. Right.
And then the last step, I bet you guys can see where this is going.
Grow
Start growing your own.
and preserve your own.
Yeah.
And you can see your garden as a living pantry as well. I often call it the
Absolutely.
living pantry.
Yeah.
And I think if we can start to tie this up a little bit, the reality is that you're going to do some of these things at the same time.
Right.
But you need to have a plan, and we really want to caution again against trying to do it all at once. Trying to be that person that says, "Oh my goodness, I need a lot more food on the shelves. I'm going to go grow a garden, preserve it all, and get it on the shelves."
Right.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You want to focus in this area. Focus on building the pantry while you're learning to garden a little bit. Maybe you're just going to eat it fresh, or you're going to can a little bit of it to build your skills up. And you start to get momentum on all of these things, and a system starts to shape up
That's right.
that works very well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great way to, without panic, without waste, without your own personal disasters in stocking your pantry,
Yep.
to slowly work through the steps and to then end up with a very, very resilient pantry at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of steps you can be doing right now to give you comfort, to help you feel good about maybe responding to the current events. Maybe these current events have motivated you to take these steps. Maybe you're already working on it, but you can do it with a plan and confidence,
Right.
and not just acting in fear and reactionary.
Absolutely. All right. Well, next week at the Pantry Chat, we're supposed to be talking about steps we can take to make our homestead more resilient, things that
Okay.
we should have on hand for homestead, and steps we can take out for the property, the animals, maybe the gardens.
Okay.
And so we'll see you guys then.
Sounds good. See you soon.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.